born child, and immediately false identification, which is the beginning of the cycle of continual birth and death, begins. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As long as the child is within the womb of his mother, he is in a very precarious and horrible condition of life. But the benefit is that he revives pure consciousness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord and prays for deliverance. But once he is outside the abdomen, when a child is born, Maya, or the illusory energy, is so strong that he is immediately overpowered into considering his body to be the self, to be his self. Maya means illusion, or that which is actually not. In the material world, everyone is identifying with his body. This false egotistic consciousness of I am this body at once develops after the child comes out of the womb. The mother and other relatives are awaiting the child, and as soon as he is born, the mother feeds him, and everyone takes care of him. The living entity soon forgets his position and becomes entangled in bodily relationships. The entire material existence is entanglement in this bodily conception of life. Real knowledge means to develop the consciousness of I am not this body. I am spirit soul, an eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Real knowledge entails renunciation or non-acceptance of this body as the self. By the influence of Maya, the external energy, one forgets everything just after birth. Therefore, the child is praying that he prefers to remain within the womb rather than come out. It is said that Sukadeva Goswami, on this consideration, remained for 16 years within the womb of his mother. He did not want to be entangled in false bodily identification. After cultivating such knowledge within the womb of his mother, he came out at the end of 16 years within the womb of his mother. He came out at the end, he came out at the end of 16 years and immediately left home so that he might not be captured by the influence of Maya. The influence of Maya is also explained in Bhagavad Gita as insurmountable. But insurmountable Maya can be overcome simply by Krishna consciousness. That is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Mam evaye prapadyam te mayamitam taranti te. Whoever surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna can get out of this false conception of life. By the influence of Maya only, one forgets his eternal relationship with Krishna and identifies himself with his body and the byproducts of the body, namely wife, children, society, friendship, and love. Thus, he becomes a victim of the influence of Maya and his materialistic life. Whoever surrenders, the influence of Maya is also explained in Bhagavad Gita as insurmountable. But insurmountable Maya can be overcome simply by Krishna consciousness. That is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Whoever surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna can get out of this false conception of life by the influence of Maya only. forgets his eternal relationship to Krishna and identifies himself with his body and the byproducts of the body, namely wife, children, society, friendship, and love. Thus, he becomes a victim of the influence of Maya, and his materialistic life of continued birth and death becomes still more stringent. Whoa. Okay. Text 21. So, Canto 3, Chapter 31, Text 21. Therefore, without being agitated anymore, I shall deliver myself from the darkness of nescience with the help of my friend, clear consciousness. Simply by keeping the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu in my mind, I shall be saved from entering into the wombs of many mothers for repeated birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The miseries of material existence begin from the very day when the spirit soul takes shelter in the ovum and sperm of the mother and father. They continue after he is born from the womb, and then they are further prolonged. We do not know where the suffering ends. It does not end, however, by one's changing his body. The change of body is taking place at every moment, but that does not mean that we are improving from the fetal condition of life to a more comfortable condition. The best thing is, therefore, to develop Krishna consciousness. Here it is stated, Upasadita Vishnu Pada. This means realization of Krishna consciousness. One who is intelligent by the grace of the Lord and develops Krishna consciousness is successful in his life because simply by keeping himself in Krishna consciousness, he will be saved from the repetition of birth and death. The child prays that it is better to remain within the womb of darkness and be constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness than to get out and again fall a victim to the illusory energy. The illusory energy acts within the abdomen as well as outside the abdomen. But the trick is that one should remain Krishna conscious, and then the effect of such a horrible condition cannot act favorably upon him. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that one's intelligence is his friend, and the same intelligence can also be his enemy. Here also the same idea is repeated. Suhirdat man naiva, friendly intelligence, absorption of intelligence in the personal service of Krishna, and full consciousness of Krishna always are the path of self-realization. So, personal service of Krishna and full consciousness of Krishna always are the path of self-realization and liberation without being unnecessarily agitated. If we take to the process of Krishna consciousness by constantly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, the cycle of birth and death can be stopped for good. It may be questioned herein how the child can be fully Krishna conscious within the womb of the mother without any paraphernalia with which to execute Krishna consciousness. It is not necessary to arrange for paraphernalia to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The child wants to become free from the clutches of Maya. One does not need any material arrangement to cultivate Krishna consciousness. One can cultivate Krishna consciousness anywhere and everywhere, provided he can always think of Krishna. The Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
can be chanted even within the abdomen of one's mother. One can chant while sleeping, while working, while imprisoned in the womb, or while outside. This Krishna consciousness cannot be checked in the womb, cannot be checked in any circumstance. The conclusion of the child's prayer is, let me remain in this condition, although it is very miserable. It is better not to fall a victim to Maya again by going outside. Well, text 22. Lord Kapila continued, the 10-month-old living entity has these desires, even while in the womb. But while he thus extols the Lord, meaning glorifies the Lord, the wind that helps parturition propels him forth with his face turned downward so that he may be born. Parturition means separation. The wind that helps parturition propels him forth with his face turned downward so that he may be born. Text 23. Pushed downward, all of a sudden by the wind, the child comes out with great trouble, head downward, breathless and deprived of memory due to severe agony. Yeah, he has to go through the small orifice of the mother's vagina, which puts tremendous pressure on his head, and basically he faints. He can't stand that pain. Pushed down all of a sudden by the wind, the child comes out with great trouble, head downward, breathless and deprived of memory due to severe agony. Yeah, he has to go through a small orifice of the mother's vagina to get out of the womb, and there's tremendous pressure on his head that is excruciating. The word krichurena means with great difficulty. When the child comes out of the abdomen through the narrow passage due to pressure there, the breathing system completely stops, and due to agony, the child loses his memory. Sometimes the trouble is so severe that the child comes out dead, or one second, dead or almost dead. One can imagine that the pangs of birth are like the child remains for 10 months in that horrible condition within the abdomen, and at the end of 10 months, he is forcibly pushed out. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord points out that a person who is serious about advancement in spiritual consciousness should always consider the 4 pangs of birth, death, disease, and old age. The materialist advances in many ways, but he is unable to stop these 4 principles of suffering inherent in material existence. Okay. And what is that? The pangs of birth, death, disease, and old age. Text number 24. The child thus falls on the ground, smeared with stool and blood, and plays just like a worm germinated from the stool. He loses his superior knowledge and cries under the spell of Maya. Text 25. After coming out of the abdomen, the child is given to the care of persons who are unable to understand what he wants, and thus he is nursed by such persons. And unable to refuse whatever is given to him, he falls into undesirable circumstances. Within the abdomen of the mother, purport, within the abdomen of the mother, the nourishment of the child was being the nourishment of the child was being carried on by nature's own arrangement. The atmosphere within the abdomen was not at all pleasing, but as far as the child's feeding was concerned, it was being properly done by the laws of nature. But upon coming out of the abdomen, the child falls into a different atmosphere. He wants to eat one thing, but something else is given to him because no one knows his actual demand, and he cannot refuse the undesirables given to him. Sometimes the child cries for the mother's breast, but because the nurse thinks that is due to pain within the stomach that he is crying, she supplies him some bitter medicine. The child does not want it, but he cannot refuse it. He is put in very awkward circumstances, and the suffering continues. Text 26. Laid down on a foul bed, infested with sweat and germs, the poor child is incapable of scratching his body to get relief from his itching sensation, to say nothing of sitting up, standing, or even moving. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It should be noted that the child is born crying and suffering. After birth, the same suffering continues and he cries because he is disturbed by the germs in his foul bed, which is contaminated by his urine and stool. The poor child continues to cry. He is unable to take any remedial measures for his relief. Text 27. In his helpless condition, gnats, mosquitoes, bugs, and other germs bite the baby, whose skin is tender. Just as smaller worms bite a big worm, the child deprived of his wisdom cries bitterly. The word Vigata Jnanam means that the spiritual knowledge which the child developed in the abdomen is already lost to the spell of Maya, owing to various kinds of disturbances and to being out of the womb. The child cannot remember what he was thinking of for his salvation. It is assumed that even if a person acquires some spiritually uplifting knowledge, circumstantially, he is prone to forget it. Not only children, but also elderly persons should be very careful to protect their sense of Krishna consciousness and avoid unfavorable circumstances so that they may not forget their prime duty. What is their prime duty? That's to always remember Krishna and serve Krishna and thus become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Text 28. In this way, the child passes through his childhood, suffering different kinds of distress, and attains boyhood. In boyhood also, he suffers pain over desires to get things he can never achieve. And thus, due to ignorance, he becomes angry and sorry. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. From birth to the end of 5 years of age is called childhood. After 5 years up to the end of the 15th year, it's called Prodanda. And at 16 years of age, youth begins. The distresses of childhood are already explained, but when the child attains boyhood, he is enrolled in a school which he does not like. He wants to play, but he is forced to go to school and study and take responsibility for passing examinations. Another kind of distress is that he wants to get some things with which to play, but circumstances may be such that he is not able to attain them, and he thus becomes aggrieved and feels pain. In one word, he is unhappy even in his boyhood, just as he was unhappy in his childhood. What to speak of youth? Boys are apt to create so many artificial demands for playing, and when they do not attain satisfaction, they become furious with anger, and the result is suffering. Text 29. With the growth of the body, the living entity, in order to vanquish the soul, increases his false prestige and anger, and thereby creates enmity towards similarly lusty people. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, verse 36, Arjuna inquired from Krishna about the cause of a living being's lust. It is said that a living entity is eternal, and as such, qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord. Then what is the reason he falls prey to the material and commits so many sinful activities by the influence of the material energy? In reply to this question, Lord Krishna said that it is lust which causes a living entity to glide down from its exalted position to the abominable condition of material existence. 1 second. This lust circumstantially changes into anger. Both lust and anger stand on the platform of the mode of passion. Lust is actually the product of the mode of passion. And in the absence of satisfaction of lust, the same desire transforms into anger on the platform of ignorance. When ignorance covers the soul, it is the source of his degradation to the most abominable condition of hellish life. To raise oneself from hellish life to the highest position of spiritual understanding is to transform this lust into love for Krishna. Sri Narottama Das Thakur, a great acharya of the Vaishnava Sampradaya, said, Kama Krishna Karma Pune. Due to our lust, we want many things for our sense gratification. But the same lust can be transformed into a purified way so that we want everything for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anger also can be utilized toward a person who is atheistic or who is envious of the personality of Godhead. As we have fallen into this material existence because of our lust and anger, the same two qualities can be utilized for the purpose of advancing in Krishna consciousness. and one can elevate himself again in his former pure spiritual position. Srila Rupa Goswami has therefore recommended that because in material existence we have so many objects of sense gratification, which we need for the maintenance of the body, we should use all of them without attachment for the purpose of satisfying the senses of Krishna. That is actual renunciation. Text 30. By such ignorance, the living entity accepts the material body, which is made of 5 elements, as himself. With this misunderstanding, he accepts non-permanent things as his own and increases his ignorance in the darkest region. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The expansion of ignorance is explained in this verse. The first ignorance is to identify one's material body, which is made of 5 elements, as the self. And the second is to accept something as one's own due to a bodily connection. In this way, ignorance expands. The living entity is eternal, but because of his accepting non-permanent things, misidentifying his interest, he is put into ignorance, and therefore he suffers material pangs. And that is actually a very profound statement. By such ignorance, the living entity accepts the material body, which is made of 5 elements, as himself. With this misunderstanding, he accepts non-permanent things as his own and increases his ignorance in the darkest region. Purport. This is Canto 3, Chapter 31, Text 30. The expansion of ignorance is explained in this verse. The first ignorance is to identify one's material body, which is made of 5 elements, as the self. And the second is to accept something as one's own due to a bodily connection. In this way, ignorance expands. The living entity is eternal, but because of his accepting non-permanent things, misidentifying his interest, he is put into ignorance, and therefore he suffers material pangs. Well, I mean, that's a very profound statement. The living entity is eternal, but because of his accepting non-permanent things, misidentifying his interests, he is put into ignorance, and therefore he suffers material pangs, material miseries. While this accepting of non-permanent things and misidentifying his interest, he is put into ignorance, and therefore he suffers material pangs. That is a real tragedy, but it's happening to everybody in this material world. That's why this verse says, by such ignorance, what is that ignorance? It's the increase of false prestige and anger, and thereby the living entity creates enmity towards similarly lusty people. So, with this misunderstanding, he accepts non-permanent things as his own and increases his ignorance in the darkest region. And what is his ignorance? That is the claim that he owns this, he owns that, and so forth, and accumulates many possessions. That's the sign of very advanced ignorance. Translation: by such ignorance, the living entity accepts the material body, which is made of 5 elements, as his self. With this misunderstanding, he accepts non-permanent things as his own and increases his ignorance in the darkest region. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The expansion of ignorance is explained in this verse. The first ignorance is to identify one's material body, which is made of 5 elements, as the self. And the second is to accept something as one's own due to a bodily connection. In this way, ignorance expands. The living entity is eternal, but because it is accepting non-permanent things, misidentifying his interest, he is put into ignorance, and therefore he suffers material pangs. Okay, so text 31. For the sake of the body, which is a source of constant trouble to him, and which follows him because he is bound by ties of ignorance and fruitive activities, he performs various actions which cause him to be subjected to repeated birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that one has to work to satisfy Yajna or Vishnu. For any work done without the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a cause of bondage. In the conditioned state, a living entity accepting his body as himself forgets his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and acts on the interest of his body. He takes the body as himself, his bodily expansions as his kinsman, and the land from which his body is born as worshipable. In this way, he performs all sorts of I'm sorry. He takes the body as himself, its bodily expansions as his kinsman, and the land from which his body is born as worshipable. In this way, he performs all sorts of misconceived activities which lead to his perpetual bondage in repetition of birth and death in various species. In modern civilization, the so-called social, national, and government leaders mislead people more and more under the bodily conception of life, with the result that all the leaders with their followers are gliding down to hellish conditions, birth after birth. An example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam. Under Yatan Dair Upaniyam Mana, when a blind man leads several other blind men, the result is that all of them fall down in a ditch. This is actually happening. There are many leaders to lead the ignorant public, but because every one of them is bewildered by the bodily conception of life, there is no peace and prosperity in human society. So-called yogis who perform various bodily feats are also in the same category as such ignorant people, because the Hatha Yoga system is especially recommended for persons who are grossly implicated in the bodily conception. The condition is that as long as one is fixed in the bodily conception, he has to suffer birth and death. Okay. Text 32. If therefore the living entity again associates with the path of unrighteousness, influenced by sensually minded people engaged in pursuit of sexual enjoyment and the gratification of the palate, he again goes to hell as before. It has been explained that the conditioned soul is put into the Anda Tamishra and Tamishra hellish conditions. And after suffering there, he gets a hellish body like the dogs or hogs. After such birth, several such births, he again comes into the form of a human being. How the human being is born is also described by Kapila Deva. The human being develops in the mother's abdomen and suffers there and comes out again. After all these sufferings, if he gets another chance in a human body and wastes his valuable time in the association of persons who are concerned with sexual life and palatable dishes, then naturally he again glides down to the same Anda Tamishra and Tamishra hells. Generally, people are concerned with the satisfaction of the tongue and the satisfaction of the genitals. That is material life. Material life means eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy, with no concern for understanding one's spiritual identity and the process of spiritual advancement. Since materialistic people are concerned with the tongue, belly, and genitals, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he must be careful about associating with such people. To associate with such materialistic men is to commit purposeful suicide in the human form of life. It is said, therefore, that an intelligent man should give up such undesirable association and should always mix with saintly persons. When he is in association with saintly persons, all his doubts about the spiritual expansion of life are eradicated, and he makes tangible progress on the path of spiritual understanding. It is also sometimes found that the people are very much addicted to a particular type of religious faith. Hindus, Muslims, and Christians are faithful in their particular type of religion, and they go to the church, temple, or mosque. But unfortunately, they cannot give up the association of persons who are too much addicted to sex life and satisfaction of the palate. Here it is clearly said that one may officially be a very religious man, but if he associates with such persons, then he is sure to slide down to the darkest region of hell. Okay, so we have to be very careful not to associate with people who are attached to their body and bodily identification. So someone considers himself a Hindu, someone else considers himself as a Muslim, and someone else considers himself as a Christian. And they are faithful in their particular type of religion, and they go to the church, temple, or mosque, but unfortunately, they cannot keep up the association of persons who are too much addicted to sex life and satisfaction of the palate. Here it is clearly said that one may officially be a very religious man, but if he associates with such persons, then he is sure to slide down to the darkest region of hell. There you are. He becomes devoid of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, spiritual intelligence, shyness, austerity, fame, forgiveness, control of the mind, control of the senses, fortune, and all such opportunities. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This is Canto 3, Chapter 31, text number 33. Those who are too addicted to sex life cannot understand the purpose of the absolute truth, nor can they be clean in their habits, not to mention showing mercy to others. They cannot remain brave, and they have no interest in the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is Krishna or Vishnu, but those who are addicted to sex life cannot understand that their ultimate interest is Krishna consciousness. Such people have no sense of decency, and even in public streets or public parks, they embrace each other just like cats and dogs, and pass it off in the name of lovemaking. Such unfortunate creatures can never become materially prosperous. Behavior like that of cats and dogs keeps them in the position of cats and dogs. They cannot improve any material condition, not to speak of becoming famous. Such foolish persons may even make a show of so-called yoga, but they are unable to control the senses and mind, which is the real purpose of yoga practice. Such people can have no opulence in their lives. In a word, they are very unfortunate. Text 34. One should not associate with the coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The restriction of association with such foolish persons is especially meant for those who are in the line of advancement in Krishna consciousness. Advancement in Krishna consciousness involves developing the qualities of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, intelligence and spiritual knowledge, simplicity, material opulence, fame, forgiveness, and control of the mind and the senses. Okay. Now you might ask a question, why does it say material opulence? Well, there's nothing wrong with material opulence if it is used in the service of Krishna. But if you use it for sense gratification, then it is sinful. Okay, all these qualities are to be manifested with the progress of Krishna consciousness. But if one associates with a Sudra, a foolish person who is like a dancing dog in the hands of a woman, then he cannot make any progress. Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond the material nescience must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. All right, now, a woman devotee hearing this can say, wait a minute. here it says that Krishna consciousness, in Krishna consciousness, and in other words, it says, Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond material nescience must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. So that includes men. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Okay, so what if you associate with women who are devotees? Well, that's okay, because they're not going to try and entice you to engage in illicit sex. They are just as serious about Krishna consciousness as the men, or at least hopefully they are. And the men also should not be attracted by women, but they should be serious about spiritual life and engage in devotional service without thinking about women and sense gratification. Their minds should be purely involved in pleasing Krishna. Then they can work side by side with women without falling down. That's why Prabhupada did not separate the devotees and just preach to men and ignore the women. He didn't do that. Because he knew if they follow, meaning the boys and girls, follow Krishna consciousness, they can work together side by side without falling down. Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond material ignorance must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. So, what does it mean, not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment? Well, not every woman is interested in sense gratification. There are women devotees. So, but we should always remember let's say, example of fire and butter. When butter is put close to the fire, what happens? The butter melts. So therefore, even if we're married, we should not be too closely involved with, let's say, women. It's not that women are demons, but devotee women are devotees. They also have to be careful about how much association they have with men. And the men also have to be careful about how much association they have with women. Because we have to always remember the example of butter and fire. If the butter comes too close to the fire, it melts. So there has to be this separation. Like, for example, when you have co-ed education, that means there's boys and girls in the same classroom. That's not good. I mean, in some Christian schools, they separate the men and the boys and the girls. And they have dress code. Nowadays, there's no dress code. Nowadays, boys and girls mingle together all the time, and because of that, they develop, uh, you know, sexual desires, especially once they become reach puberty, meaning around 12 years old. They develop these desires for sense gratification, especially if they're in close proximity of young girls or young boys. So nowadays, sometimes, like a 8-year old girl or 10-year old girl will have a boyfriend, and they might even date at that young age. Right? So these kinds of things are not very conducive to have a spiritual life. Therefore, it says, Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond material nescience must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. So that includes men right there, men or women. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. So, women should not associate with men interested in material enjoyment, and men should not associate with women who are interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Wow, what a statement that is. It's more dangerous than a person uh, uh, interested than more dangerous than suicide. My God, what a statement that is by Prabhupada. Therefore, we have to be very, very careful who we associate with. Are we careful about who we associate with? There's no real warning being given in schools, especially co-ed schools. The girls come with, very short dresses and expose their legs and their breasts and things like that. And what does that do to the boys? So it's not that women are evil, but if they are not, let's say, controlled, then all havoc will take place. The young boys and girls will mix together and engage in illicit sex and basically ruin their childhood or their early ages, teenage period of life with sense gratification rather than with education and self-control. So therefore it says, Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond material ignorance must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. So that's men or women and men. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Well, okay, are there any questions? Any questions anyone would like to ask? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. So you have to watch out who you associate with. No questions outside? Anybody have a question?
No questions.
Huh?
No questions.
No questions. Wow, that means there's no answers. Now, this doesn't mean that all women are evil. No, they're not. And all men are not necessarily evil. But when there are either men or women that are addicted to sense gratification, then they engage in sinful activities. And association with those type of people is like taking poison. So we should avoid the association of people like that. Therefore, if you go to a school where there is co-ed education and boys and girls are associating with each other, it's not good for education because they'll think about dating and parties and all kinds of things. So the best thing is to give up such association and only associate with devotees who are serious about advancing in spiritual life and not serious about advancing in mundane life of sense gratification. Okay, so if there are no questions, then we will stop at this point. And our main takeaway today is a direct advice of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond the material nations must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. So that includes men. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Wow, this is a fantastic statement. So, Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond the material nations must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. My God, what a statement that is. But of course, nobody pays attention because they don't come to class. Even if they come to class, they read something, then they go out and forget about it. So this is a very important statement, most important statement, that in Krishna consciousness, that Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond the material nations must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Wow. Very important statement. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada. Without your purports, where would we be? We would be completely lost and chasing after the low-class behaviors of sense gratification. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Without Prabhupada's purports, no matter how many times we read the verses, we will never be able to really understand them. But with Prabhupada's purports, because Prabhupada doesn't mince his words, we can understand what is the reality of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So basically, what did we learn today? We should avoid the association of non-devotees and always keep the association of genuine devotees. And especially in the period when we're being educated, there should be separation between boys and girls. This is what they do in Catholic schools. They separate the boys from the girls. At least they used to. I don't know if they still do it. And they have clothing rules. How you should come to school, how you should be dressed. They have codes, clothing codes to be dressed in a proper way, not having provocative dress. Why? Because you can't focus your mind on education if you're always subjected to enticing sexual, let's say, things like sexual clothing, sexual talk, and sexual and too close association of boys and girls. It's not good for them. Hare Krishna. Okay, we will end there. And our main takeaway today is Lord Chaitanya has advised that any person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and who desires to pass beyond the material ignorance must not associate himself with women or with persons interested in material enjoyment. That includes men. For a person seeking advancement in Krishna consciousness, such association is more dangerous than suicide. Well, a woman can raise her hand and ask a question and say, well, does that mean all women? No, that doesn't mean all women. Women who are devotees, they're different than women who are not devotees. But still, the principle of not associating closely with women or women closely associating with unholy men should be avoided. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna, Krishna, Hare
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara.